Welcome back to the Power We Hold podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Albury, and in the episode that you'll hear in just a moment, I co-host with Caleb Williams, the beautiful, lovely, and delightful human being that I get to call friend and colleague. And we will have a conversation with my friend Trevor Bayack of the Freedom Market. But before we get into that, I just want to share something with you on a personal note. I experience what I'm going to call fluctuating energy levels in relation to the various aspects of the projects that I work on. And I say aspects of the projects I work on because I really see everything I do, meaning the activism, the eco art through choral projects, and my healing, my personal healing work, and my work as an Akashic Records reader. I feel this is all actually the same core soul mission in this lifetime. And I'm still figuring out how to talk about how these three aspects, I think I just said four things, but I kind of count the healing journey as part of the spiritual Akashic Records work as one. I'm still figuring out how they work together in my mind, in language. In the world that we live in, there's clear-cut pathways for artist, for activist, for woo-woo crazy spiritual person. But I really see all three of these aspects of who I am as part of my core soul mission in this lifetime, which is to heal myself and others and the planet, our relationship to the planet through art and the oceans. That's what lights me up. And so everything I do revolves around that. And inevitably, because I have so many pots on the stove, so many kettles, that I'm trying to boil, I put my attention in one place, and then I shift it to another place, and then I shift it to another place. And I'm still working on that balance of how do I touch all aspects of my work consistently over time. And part of that, there's a shadow there around like being good enough or doing it right. And what I know in my core self is that whenever I do something, that's the right time to do it, because that's when I'm lit up to do it. That's when I'm my best version of myself to show up for the project. So, they'll tell you when you are creating podcasts or social media, presences or profiles or whatever, that you should show up consistently, right? That they should be like consistent over time. And whereas I would really love to be that person, I'm just not always that person. So I'm just going to out that shadow here with you right now, that, the shadow of being like not good enough with timing. So for those of you that keep coming back, and for my new listeners, thank you so much for being on this journey with me, and for your generosity and understanding of, when I'm able to show up and be present with you here, and when I need to recoil into my womb space, my Greenpoint haven, as I like to call my apartment, and do some healing work, because, I think this only works when I show up full and ready to give from a heart-centered and full place within myself. And I definitely understand that is against the paradigm of our societal infrastructure of, work 9 to 5, work 40 hours a week, work, consistently. And honestly, like, who does that work for? I really doubt there's many people that like that really works for them, where they show up at a job and they work at 9 to 5 every day with consistency, with like, you know, no Google wormholes or hours, you know, watching TikToks, or, you know, getting diverted to other non-work related ideas or the like. You know, I think it's important to, especially now post-pandemic, like I think this is part of the lesson, to show up full and then work there. And I get that doesn't necessarily jive with like a weekly or monthly or whatever paycheck consistently. But, you know, we can change that. We can have a more humane relationship and dynamic to work, because we create the dynamics of work, right? We create businesses. No corporation is without people creating it, right? And that also taps into my boundless hope that I feel is quite grounded for our future, because, you know, right now there's about 100 corporations that are the biggest polluters of the planet. Like 70% of the world's pollution is from like 100 corporations. And I see that just one day, you know, one of those corporations could just change the way it functions entirely. Like the right CEO with the right board members, and, you know, maybe their children, you know, come home from school and they're like, you know, Daddy, Mommy, you know, why did I learn at school that like Exxon is one of the worst polluters of the planet, and aren't you the CEO of Exxon, and like, can't you do something about this, you know? And having that personal connection to someone who cares about the planet, and maybe that CEO needs to watch their child like have some eco anxiety, and then, you know, really connect with something authentic in themselves, because I don't really believe that any human acting in authenticity is going to be doing destructive things on the planet or towards other people. So, you know, people change. It's real. I've changed. I've watched others change. I've watched my relationships change. You know, I have a relationship with my mother that I never thought possible. Like truly from childhood, I never thought possible. And now we have that relationship, and it's just from, you know, the last couple of years of healing that I've been working on, both spiritually and in my neuro pathway reprogramming. And I'm so grateful for that. And, you know, I watch relationships in my life evolve from the work that I'm doing on myself. And so, you know, I know it's possible, and it's not that hard. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there's hard moments, but, you know, you get through them, because when you need a tool, the tool shows up. It's that idea of when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to open this next series of 4 episodes with Trevor Bayack, and then also our interview with Heather McGhee, the author of The Sum of Us, which, you guys, this book will blow your mind, open your heart, and make you understand the importance of being anti-racist at the next level. In that, you know, it's actually, it hurts Caucasian, it hurts white people as well to be racist. You know, mic drop moment. Like, this book is really good. And she has countless examples of why that's true. So Trevor and I interviewed her for the podcast that Trevor used to run, that was called Gimme the Loop, and then was called something else at one point, and now it's no longer with us. So that's why I'm taking the episode and launching it here, because I think it's a really important conversation. And I'm excited to share that with you, to share Trevor with you. He's such a lovely human. I like to call him the hardest working man in social justice in North Brooklyn. Of course, currently he's based in Florida, but he'll be back up later this month. And yeah, he and I have ongoing discussions around social justice and economic justice and what it means to work with money and the energetics of money. What I love about our relationship is that we do agree on many things, but when we don't agree, it's okay. You know, we do have differing views on like grant money and sponsorship funds and the way to grow a project organically or, you know, with support. And we get to exchange those ideas from a place of respect and love and appreciation for each other. So, you know, we can both get very, you know, intense about our ideas. But it comes from a place of authentic, you know, striving for the betterment of humanity. So I'm so excited to share these episodes with you. So first you'll hear 2 episodes of the conversation with Caleb and I talking with Trevor. And then the next 2 episodes will be the interview re-airing of the conversation Trevor and I had with Heather McGhee in, I guess it was early 2021. I'll put the exact dates in the show notes. Yeah, so thank you for your patience and your love and your commitment to the work that you're doing in your life to be a better advocate for other people, for showing up for the planet and for showing up for yourself. To, you know, I really want to thank you for taking care of yourself first, because really it sounds counterintuitive, but you can't take care of anyone else until you've first taken care of yourself. Just like you can't really love someone else with what love really is, which love is inherently unconditional as part of the definition of the term, but we've added the term unconditional to love because most expressions of love in our interactions in, you know, the institutions of our lives don't come with that unconditional element. So it's not actually love if it's not unconditional, right? So yeah, I want to thank you for taking care of yourself first, for filling your cup first, because when you give from the bounty of the love within you, then you're really giving something valuable, something healing. And when you're not full, when you're not really taken care of, when you haven't really loved yourself, and I mean in a real tangible way, I don't mean like, you know, I took a bubble bath and I had a massage. You know, I don't mean like that. I mean on a spiritual level. If you haven't been able to do that first, your giving will have conditions. Your giving will be, yeah, a little incomplete. And I don't want you to give from there. I want you to give from where you feel full, where you feel like you have boundless abundance to share. And, you know, it's a negotiation. It's a trial and error kind of thing. It doesn't mean don't ever give until, you know, you're confident you have it all figured out. Like, because we're never going to have it all figured out, 1. And 2, it, you know, this is a live, you know, experiment, this human being loving thing. You just give it your best go and see what happens and adjust and learn from there. So that's my introductory rampage. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your thoughts and attention and who you are in this world. And without further ado, here's the first episode with Trevor and Caleb Williams. Welcome back to the Power We Hold podcast. I am your host, Vanessa Albury, with my co-host, Caleb Williams.
Hi.
And we have a very special guest with us today. But before I introduce him, I want to, I want to review something that came up in a recent conversation we had on the podcast that will air. It hasn't aired yet, but it will air before this does. is when we were talking about the person who his trauma and my trauma conflicted, and it was turned into like an understanding that I was projecting a racism upon this person when in fact it was my own food insecurity. And I feel like there was a moment where it kind of caught in my throat where I feel like I kind of put you on the spot to like determine if what I did or didn't do was racist, and then I felt like that was an inappropriate position to put you in. And I just wanted to say, like, I'm sorry if it felt like I put you, it didn't seem like you, but I felt in my gut, like, oh, that's not how I wanted that to land, you know? Like, I'm always here to learn from you and to hear you, and you're so insightful, and I just value your insight, but I never want you to feel put upon to, like, say, you know, judge of racism. Like, I deem that racist, I deem that not racist. Yeah. So I just wanted to apologize to you.
No worries. I didn't see it as that. I just saw it as like just having conversation and venting, but also hearing your perspective. I can't ultimately make a decision because I wasn't there and I don't know both sides, but I can hear from you, and knowing your personality and how you are as a person and your morals can like judge from that. So
I appreciate that. You're always so good about like seeing a full picture, and I really appreciate that about you. And I also really appreciate that about our guest, who I will now introduce, Trevor Bayack of Freedom Market. Trevor, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on, Caleb and Vanessa. I appreciate you guys asking me to come on the show, and I'm happy to be here.
I am so delighted to have you. As I've told you, I have been dreaming up this conversation for at least a year. And I'm really excited to have it at this point, now that we're almost a year, we're over a year since the first Freedom Market, right? Because that was in December. And you've learned so much in that time, and I've learned so much in that time, and I know Caleb has been doing so much in that time. So, let's just give a little background on how we know each other and how we connected. Do you remember when we presented at the McCarran Gathering?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the Between the Windows, absolutely. It was very early in the McCarran Gathering meetings, and we were having many more programming than we have now. And at this time, we were over on the by the baseball field, and I didn't know either one of you at the time, and then you presented this art project that you were doing in the neighborhood called Between the Windows, and I thought it was an amazing project. And we spoke after that, and I was introduced to what you do, what you're doing with Caleb, and then what you do overall as an artist, and I thought it was really cool, and I thought that we should connect. Actually, you thought we should connect, and since then, we've been in contact on a regular basis through McCarran Gathering. I've actually had Caleb, your artwork, at the location where I'm leaving now, actually. But we had the banner, "What do you do when this happens?" I forgot the exact title of the artwork with in that shows what happens if police attack you. Who do you call when this happens? And it's been hanging from the fire escape at my former home since, I guess, summer, since we had the activist lounge. And for me, I was telling Vanessa the other day, it's like a banner to the neighborhood. Like, this is a place of resistance. This is a place where you know that there are people here that are fighting for Black and brown lives. And it just came down. It was one of the last things I took down as I'm making this transition, moving out. And I said, I'm going to keep this up. I could have taken it down earlier, but I said, I'm going to keep this up, kind of like the flag. And when this flag is gone, unfortunately, it means that I am gone as well. So it was a great experience getting to know you and getting to have that art, that banner hang in my at our place. So yes, so that's how I got to know both of you guys.
Wow. 'Cause I didn't know that. I didn't know it was still there. So hearing that, I don't know, I guess like having to process that, but it means a lot to know that my art is in a space. Like I've been talking a lot about in my classes, bringing my art to the people, and without having to have it in a white wall institution or where it's intimidating or people don't feel comfortable, bringing it to the people so they're forced to see it every day. You know, like we talked about it in regards to Between the Windows and what that just means overall, but now bringing a social justice aspect to it. And just also within the community that you're in Brooklyn, and allowing my people to see that every day, you know. Yeah, that's powerful. I wish I knew that sooner. I would have been like
I knew
going
I
over
was
there.
holding on to it.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's beautiful.
It's just, and I mean, I've read a little bit about why you do it and how it relates back to the 70s and the 60s with people hanging their sheets out the window and expressing themselves that way, and that's such a grassroots way of expression. And I really appreciate you bringing that into another level. And so thank you for doing that. And I'm excited to see what the next project that you guys have together.
You know, thank you, Trevor. So appreciate your words. And I just think it speaks to the beauty of what we can create when we come together across race, across backgrounds, across ages, you know, and the multiplicity of ideas and expression that comes out of that. Opportunity comes out of it, expression, sharing, collaboration, unity, and it's through our diversity that we reach that unity. It's through appreciating, you know, like I bring the put it on the buildings side, Kayla brings her perspective as a Black American, and a woman in this world today, and together it creates a whole new something that hasn't existed before, right? And that's just one small example. Mm-hmm. We can exponentially, you know, grow from there. And I think that's something that that's actually something I really want to talk to you about. What your secret sauce is, because you, Trevor, are very good at navigating hosting a Black-led space while also making room for white allies to take leadership position. I worked with you as an organizer for almost a year on the Freedom Market, and I felt very much like I was contributing, like I added the eco-friendly side to the situation. And we had moments where we disagreed, but we always also respected each other and found each other. I actually, you two are two of my favorite people for this, because you're both so good at, you know, seeing people for people, being people, right? And it's not first we're different colors and different ages and different races and different genders, but it's first we're humans. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you navigated that, or navigate that still.
Well, thank you for that. I absolutely believe that this fight that we have for social, environmental, and economic justice is something that we do have to work together as a community. And I'm not to knock any other activist groups out there, but I always felt more comfortable working as a diverse group, as a diverse community, because from diverse voices you have different angles and different solutions that you could see. And yes, the people who are most oppressed, I usually have to, we learned this from Heather McGhee.
Yes.
The people who are most oppressed usually have the clearest view of the solutions, but that doesn't mean that it should be to the exclusion of other voices. And at McCarran, it's a group that's very diverse. It's how I met you, Vanessa, you know, and imagine if we were just a Black-led space, we would never, I would have never, who knows if I would have met you, but the chances diminish if you just only work with a certain group or a certain coalition. And you look back at some of the great leaders, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton. You go back to these leaders who really believed in working together as a coalition. Fred Hampton was working, we talk about, with the Puerto Ricans and with the poor whites to form a coalition. Martin Luther King was talking about working together on an economic, in terms of class as opposed to race. And it seems like every time leaders start to work in that and start to find some traction in that area, that's when they get the most pushback. And it's who knows, but in my belief, that's the reason why these leaders were assassinated. And because it gets to the core of our problem, it gets to the core of the issue here. And this is what I learned. I suspected it, but at Freedom Market and at McCarran, I started looking into it as an economic issue that we have in terms of our struggles, more than it is a race issue, that economics is at the root of our issues. And once you start to look at that through that filter, you start to see why they are dividing us, why they don't want us to work with other communities. And that's where I put my focus. So that's why I really find value in working with a diverse group of people.
You said something interesting that we've talked about before, and I just want to pick up it again here, that the oppressed see the solutions the best. And I think this is something that I think is an interesting discussion, because I think they see the problem the clearest, obviously, right? Because you're receiving it. But I think the solution really does come from the collaboration, because it takes all parties feeling empowered in the solution to really land a working solution. I think when you create the dichotomy of we have the solution, you don't have the solution, it just reverses the segregation and the power play. But when it's like we have the solution, then it's like, oh, we're all in this together. You know, it's like a collaborative group thing. And I think it's like very important to err on the side of the oppressed voices in that conversation, because we really need to hear it. Like, I'm thinking about South Africa after they came out of apartheid, and they had the, what was that called? The reconciliation meetings, where it was just like the whole country listening to the oppression that had been happening for, decades, and everyone had to take notice, right? And then solutions, new systems and situations grew out of like that expression. Like, you need that expression, you need the sharing, you need the vocalization of what the problem is, and the need. You need the need presented. Yeah, what do you think?
Yes, go ahead.
I found interesting when you were talking about Fred Hampton. I recently just watched Judas and the Black Messiah, and overall, like, watching it, I towards the end it got me mad, obviously, just with everything. But what you were talking about, like being inspired, like people like him, and allowing it to have a diverse space, such as the Freedom Market, such as he did, like you said, with the Puerto Ricans and the poor whites. And you are doing that. Like, when going to the Freedom Market went over the summer, and being in that space was so beautiful. Like, everybody knew their role. Like, there wasn't like a hierarchy or anything. Like, everybody had a role to play, and they played it. And you created this safe space that is so powerful and allows people to be vulnerable, And back then, I do think still now, like, people in government and higher positions are afraid of that. I think that when they see that we come together, like, we are powerful together, and when we come together, that gives us hope. And when they see that we have hope, they want to destroy it. So I think what you're doing is beautiful and very powerful, and I just congratulate you for bringing these people together, Yeah.
So well said.
For that.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
That's like the follow-up book, right? Like, Heather McGhee's first book, The Sum of Us, is a summary of the problem. And the second book should be, here are examples across the country of communities like the one you created through Freedom Market. So beautiful.
Yes, thank you for that. And yes, and I do feel that it is a special space. I think there's, post the tragic murder of George Floyd, there's been a lot of spaces like this that's created around the country. And I do think we are in a time that's kind of a enlightenment of sorts, where an awakening is another word we love to use.
Revival. Renaissance.
Yeah, I think we're there. I think it's something that's happening. And as you said, Vanessa, it is important that, all the voices are heard, that it's because of the different voices. Yes, we want to create a space where there was none for Black and brown voices. And that's the new ingredient that we want to really lean into. Yeah. But we don't do it at the exclusion of other voices. Yeah. So it's exciting. I love the community. I always say how tragic it is that we had to meet under the circumstances of a death. But if there's something that came out of that, the incredible community that's, it's sad. I mean, just saying it, that I would not have met either one of you had it not been for that. It's sad to say, but at the same time, it's a powerful reaction to what happened there. And
we can be thankful for the presence that his absence has created for us. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
I wanted to ask you, what's your ultimate goal for the Freedom Market? What's your ultimate goal, and do you guys have like a mantra, or like
give us the spiel, right?
Yeah, like where do you see it in the future? What's your mantra? What do you guys go by? And yeah.
So that's ever evolving, as Vanessa remembers. It seems there is one core idea, which is to shift the wealth and close the wealth gap. That's the core idea, economic empowerment. How we do it is what's evolved. There's some core things, again, diversity, inclusion, but there's always because it's new, because it's something. It's not nothing is completely new and unique, but because for me it's a new experience, and for all of us, our neighbors who are working with Freedom Market, it's a new experience, and people are coming in and coming out. We do have to change and shift gears. The main goal is, for me personally, is to have an effect on a community level, so affect a neighborhood like we were based in North Brooklyn for the most part. And I believe that we need to work with this community, because everything, as they said, all politics is local. And one of the recent realizations that I came to is that we need to, I'm working with this term, acronym, CPR, which is an easy acronym to remember. And the way it translates for me is this: C, it has to be a compelling story. So it has to be something where people are compelled to want to get behind, which we had, and we're trying to make sure we continue that. The P, it has to be practical, something practical. So sometimes you have ask of the community of things that are not practical. Like, I want to end the racism, yes, but what do I do today? Is there something that you could do right now? So that's the P, have it be practical. And the R, it has to be radical. So are we working towards radical change? So for me, those are the three pillars of activism that I incorporate in Freedom Market, CPR. And I feel like it's yet to be seen if it works, but I feel like I try to keep those three ideals intact in every action that I take.
Beautiful. What do you feel like, because it's been a year, late December is when we kicked off the first one, right? Yeah. what do you feel like has been your biggest learning in the last year? Because you and I connected over, the energetics of money are changing. Like the new energetic of money is love. What does that mean? Yes. Right? How does that change our lives? So what have you learned over the last year?
So it's that's a tough question. I guess one of the things that I've seen a reinforcement of the ideas that we spoke about, which is kind of the thing I'm kind of happy, proud to see that the ideas are still intact, which is that we need to look at it in terms of a class struggle, the 1% versus the rest of us. We need to look at it at this story of racism is one that's painted to divide us, which is also what's reinforced when we spoke to Heather McGhee. This is the first thing. Can I interject
that we're gonna re-air that interview on this podcast just so that everyone knows? Okay, go ahead.
That was a great interview Vanessa and I did, and yes, it'd be great to go back to that one. But yeah, to see all of those ideas that for me were bubbling for years and years before 2020, and then kind of crystallized in 2020. Like, wait a minute, what's happening here? Why are we being told that it's because of the color of our skin we are painted as the other? Why are we the ones that are painted as the power to affect change on an economic level, when the people who actually have the power, the people who change, like repeal acts like a Glass-Steagall Act, which makes borrowing of your money into banks, they can speculate with that, or to enact something like Citizens United, which makes corporations people. Like, we, people of color, don't have the power to affect this change. The people who do, the 1%, they're the ones that are funding the lobbyists with billions of dollars. They're the ones that create these acts and these laws. They're the ones that actually have the power. Yet the people who are not activists or awoke, I should say, look at another narrative, which is the one of race. So to see that reinforced from the beginning to now is something that I find motivating. As for freedom market, it's really, because for me, the idea of the freedom market started off as a retail more than an activist. So we were about just highlighting black and brown businesses. And to see how it's evolved to where, it's about getting the message out as much, which kind of evolved with our first park, which was actually in March, where we were really talking to the people who walked by and passed by. And that's kind of I find that that's just as important as bringing economic empowerment, to have that message to go with it. So that's something that that's the biggest surprise, the fact that I've personally and with the community found the power to stand up and to scream as loud as I can. Listen, wake up, people. That's the biggest surprise.
Talk to me about, you talked about our North Brooklyn community, which has some interesting populations, right? We have some populations that have lived here a long time that are not as welcoming to what we've been up to at the Freedom Market. I learned that when I put up flyers one day. The next day they were all down. I was like, all these other flyers are still up. Why are those flyers down? Oh yeah, like there is actually a strong undercurrent of racism in North Brooklyn that people would be surprised to know about when they look at just the popular image of North Brooklyn. And I know you've had specific run-ins on this front. Can you, what kind of advice or what have you learned about navigating a confrontation like that?
So yes, that's actually before 2020. I've been in North Brooklyn for 17 years.
Oh wow!
And on the South Side, where it's more diverse, and every time I would come north, you would feel that, especially the further you go into Greenpoint, you will feel it, and you'll feel it strongly, that there is othering and that you are not welcome here. Post 2020, I guess that people became more aware of the overall othering in the country and around the world and in the city. But it didn't hit me until, like, on a surface level, like it did a few weeks ago when we started fighting for this space called the Bedford Slip. Now, the Bedford Slip is a vintage market that was founded by a woman of color. I don't want to say if she appears to be a black woman, but I just don't know her well enough to know if she is or not. But she is a woman of color, and it's a space that's on Bedford and Lorimer at the intersection. And the reason that they come here is for the very same reason that the farmers market on Driggs and Union comes here, because this neighborhood is a wealthy neighborhood, and there's access to wealth that helps build these businesses. And we were working to get the Bedford Slip was being proposed by North Brooklyn Mutual Aid, and they wanted therefore to create a safe space. We were there as Freedom Market fighting because we want to support the black and brown entrepreneurs who are setting up here to have access to that wealth, the 8-to-1 wealth gap between black and white families. And one of the ways to resolve that on a community level, on a practical level, is to create this space where they could set up and have conduct business in a place that looks similar to the farmers market, where people in this neighborhood love the farmers market.
Yeah, we do.
It's crowded every Saturday, and because they have that safe space where they could conduct business. So we set up there to sign a petition, and we found that, well, me personally, I felt the first week or two, I felt like, people just watching, monitoring me, the older neighbors, I would say, from my observation, were monitoring, the fact that I'm setting up here. The week after that, we were approached by one of these neighbors and asked, "What are you guys doing here? Like, first of all, why are you asking me what? Like, this is not your land. This is not you. You don't have the right to ask me for my pass." And I asked him, "What are you doing here?" And it escalated to a point where. And before, I should also say that you would see in the 2 weeks the police were just, the monitoring from the police was insane. They were parking cars. Even before I noticed it, one of our neighbors said, "Trevor, did you see the police cars? Do you see the police officers? They were going to come over here," and they stopped and they went back into Starbucks. And I said, "No, I didn't notice that." So yeah, something's going to, something's up. And the following week, sure enough, there were more cars. They were parked in the space where we were parked before. They were waiting for us. I moved. So basically, to make a long story short, this neighbor asked us, "What are we doing here? You guys don't belong here. This space is not we need to preserve parking spots." And they were signing a petition to protect the parking spots, the number in the couples. There's like 5 parking spots. And I know that I have never seen people fight this hard to preserve parking spots. What I have seen is people fight this hard to maintain the status quo, to maintain segregation by default. And we recognize this, and I recognize this. And all it did is it made us lean in harder to fight for the Bedford Slip. And we are asking, this is why I'm out. A McCarran gathering, which is every night. I'm out here a half hour earlier, 6:30. And I get on the speaker, and I speak as loud as I can, and I tell people, head on over to Freedom Market NBK, sign a petition to create the space for our black and brown neighbors, because they need access to this wealth that's been over 400 years, that's been unevenly distributed because of oppression, racism, redlining, you name it. And let's do your small part. You talk about CPR. Here's a practical thing that you could do right now. Go on over to Freedom Market, sign the petition. That's all you have to do today. Tomorrow there may be something else, but it doesn't get any easier than that. And that's how we have to fight. We have to fight to build a diverse neighborhood. Otherwise, this neighborhood would look like Soho or wherever else it is. And that's not what we want to see in North Brooklyn.
What is so I signed the North Brooklyn Slip petition, but is there a deadline for people to sign it, or what are the parameters there?
And can you sign it online?
Yeah, you can sign it
online.
Oh,
you can?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get you hooked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I spoke to North Brooklyn Mutual Aid, they say it's March is when they're gonna stop we'll take the next step.
Okay.
So this is going to be happening till March. I'm personally in transition, so I'm going to be heading down south. I want to actually take the show on the road. Those plans may change a little because of the Omicron strain, but I plan to be back here at the end of January, and then really, really push the fight for that space towards March, and just be as loud as I can. And that's so yeah. March is the deadline.
How many petitions do you need?
Well, this is one petition. I don't know how many signatures.
I'm sorry, that's one signatures.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I think it's just as many as we can get. But I do need to find out exactly what it is. And I asked the organizer from North Brooklyn Mutual Aid, have we had a positive effect in terms of getting people signed up? And he said yes. And I would love to get more exact numbers, but again, it doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of one more than it would be if I didn't speak up.
Yeah.
We'll put a link in the show notes
and
for
I'll
people.
Post it in my bio, and
it's in my bio too.
I'll make a post about it as well.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk about that feeling you had that you shared with me around the conflict and thinking, oh no, do I need to call the police to protect me? Can you talk about that internal dialogue?
So I actually, I didn't want the police. I mean, when you talk about Caleb, your work, that you and Vanessa worked on, and who do you call when this happens? And that's our state of mind. That's how we are always afraid that the police is you choose between danger from another personal danger from the police. So my action is to never call the police unless, who knows, I've never had so I wasn't going to call the police in that case for sure. I mean, he was going to have to I just got louder and just made a lot of noise in the street and said, this is why you need to fight and stand up against this. This neighbor here is here to fight for a neighborhood that's not inclusive, and I just made everybody know what's happening. The other neighbors, actually one of the neighbors from North Brooklyn Mutual Aid engaged him, because as I was walking away from him, he started walking towards me and egging me on in a way to react. And this is what happens, because the police are there now, and I see the car, and then we had another volunteer went over to the police, the squad car, and was speaking to them while they were inside the car. And then they got out the car because they were right across the street. And the strange thing was, and there was a little bit of a conflict in that, because when neighbors do this, they do this because they know that when you have a black and a neighbor of color and then a Caucasian neighbor, if the police are involved, the chances are of harm coming to the black or brown neighbor is that much higher, especially if it's an older. And I felt that this was his strategy, because he was just... Anyway, so what happened was the police came out the car, and maybe to his surprise and a bit to my relief, there were two officers, black officers. And so at least I felt this may not go down the way it went down before. But then again, we've seen what happened in McCarran, where we had we literally fought with the police, and it was an act of aggression that was started by the police chief, and it was actually mentioned in Letitia James' report that she submitted about a year ago, and it was a black officer. So you never know, and sometimes it could be worse, as we've heard and we've seen in many examples. Even in the George Floyd case, there was officers of color who were involved. So anyway, what happened was, to my surprise, the officers came over, and I didn't know it at the time. I heard it later when one of the neighbors sent me a recording that the police were actually telling him, "What are you doing here, causing trouble? These people have a right to express themselves." and that was to my surprise. So in that case, it worked out in that the police did the thing that they were supposed to do, is protect our right of free speech, and didn't do the thing that they usually do, which is to tell us because of our color that we need to move on or get out or whatever.
It's such a messed up situation. Like, messed up is not the word I wanted to use, but I'm trying to keep this family friendly. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's raw and it's real, and it's just the reality that we live in, and it's not right, but it's just something that I don't think people fully realize that we have to think about. Mm-hmm. Think about, can I call the cops or can I not call the cops? How will this turn out in my favor? Am I gonna die? Am I gonna be hurt? Like, how is this gonna turn out, this situation? So yeah, I'm working on a body of work that is called I'm Just a Kid, and it talks about kids that were killed at the hands of police officers, and just the idea that when Black and brown kids come out their mother's womb, we're already depicted with this stereotype without us even being able to talk or just get into the world and understand ourselves. So
Wow.
yeah.
It's gonna be good. We're gonna do a conversation in that show for sure.
That's a deep topic, absolutely, and it's part of the some of the discussions that we have here at McCarran deals with the topics pertaining, of course, to how we are otherized and how we are made to we are cast in the role of the menacing or the whatever stereotypes you could think of. Mm-hmm. How we are always cast in those roles. So I'm definitely going to be looking forward to seeing that work